Hi, my name is Rick Archer, and you're listening to Awakenings, right here on Crew LP 100.1 FM, the voice of Fairfield, Iowa, and beyond. Independent, open source, listener-supported, solar-powered, grassroots community radio, broadcasting from the Cultural District in Fairfield, Iowa. Many of us here in Fairfield feel that we live in a special community. If you ask us what makes it special, we'll probably recite a list of events and accomplishments such as concerts, the Art Walk, MUM and its activities, the Arts and Convention Center, the Roosevelt Recreation Center, the Loop Trail, Crew FM, ecological initiatives, various awards, and so on. This show is about something just as wonderful as all those things, but less obvious. Dozens, if not hundreds of people in this town are undergoing a shift to a radically different state of consciousness, which is transforming their understanding of themselves and the world. For some, this shift has been abrupt and dramatic. For others, it has been so gradual that they may not have realized it has occurred. The purpose of this show will be to enable these people to tell their stories. Such shifts or awakenings are not new. Christ spoke of the kingdom of heaven within. Buddhists speak of nirvana. Zen masters of satori. Hindus of moksha. Psychologist Abraham Maslow coined the phrase self-actualization. And millions of people around the world, including many without religious or spiritual inclinations, report having experienced peak or mystical experiences. So we're talking about something timeless and universal, something which hopefully will interest a broad spectrum of our listeners rather than just the local meditating community. Those of us who did learn to meditate 2, 3, or 4 decades ago were told that after 5 to 8 years, we could expect to reach a state called cosmic consciousness. Most people feel that prediction didn't pan out. They think maybe Maharishi was overly optimistic, giving us a sales pitch or trying not to discourage us. In fact, I once heard Maharishi say, speaking metaphorically, that if you meet a man in a desert, you should tell him that water is just a mile away, even though you know it's 10 miles away, because if you tell him the truth, he'll be too discouraged to go on. Some people in Fairfield have become discouraged and have abandoned spiritual aspirations. Others still meditate for various reasons, but are skeptical of claims of higher states of consciousness. When I started telling friends about my intention to do this show, many were enthusiastic, but some said, "Right, you're going to interview people who think they're enlightened." I guess some people find it hard to believe that apparently ordinary friends and neighbors might be experiencing something extraordinary. Maybe they expect enlightenment to look as remarkable on the outside as it is reputed to be on the inside. As Christ put it, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household. This is not to imply that the guests on this show will be prophets or that they should be honored, but I think the point is apt. This show will attempt to dispel skepticism and misconceptions by week after week, allowing otherwise ordinary people in our community and elsewhere to relate their experience of spiritual awakening. The terminology is tricky because there are no universally agreed upon definitions to describe this experience. So please forgive us if we use some unfamiliar terms. We'll try to clarify our definitions as we go along. I hope that after a while, those listening will become convinced, as I am, that genuine and permanent spiritual awakenings are not just a pipe dream, but are real and are becoming commonplace, both here in Fairfield and around the world. I don't consider myself qualified to judge anyone's subjective state, so I'll take people at their word, ask questions which might enable them to give our listeners a sense of what they are experiencing, and invite you to ask questions as well. This will be a call-in show, although this pilot episode is pre-recorded, so we won't be taking calls tonight. Like all Crew FM programming, this show is being streamed live from our website, kruufm.com, and will be archived there. It will also be videotaped and aired on FPAC, Fairfield's public access TV station. Those videos will be archived and viewable on the web for at least a month. I won't ordinarily take so long to introduce each show. I want my guests to do most of the talking, but for this first show, I wanted to explain what I'm trying to do. I'm very grateful to James Moore and the great crew at Crew for their heroic efforts in creating this wonderful radio station. So let's get started. I conceived of this show a couple of weeks ago when I was working out on my Bowflex machine listening to a spiritual teacher named Adyashanti. And the thought just dawned on me, I'd like to do a radio show and, interview awakened people, and I know many of them in this town. And then after I gave some thought to the idea of doing the show, I began thinking about who I'd like my first guest to be. And in the same sort of spontaneous way, I thought I'd like to have George and Mary on. George and Mary Foster, that is, who are today's guests, because I've known them for a long time. I consider them to be very sincere, genuine people. And I've spent many happy hours discussing spiritual experiences with them, and I'm convinced that both of them have undergone something really significant in terms of a spiritual awakening, which is maybe a little bit rare for a couple to both be kind of neck and neck in terms of their spiritual progress. So George and Mary Foster are our guests for today, and I'd like to start by having them each introduce themselves and tell us just a little bit about, you know, who they are, what they do currently, and then we'll kind of go back historically and trace the course of their progress to their current state of experience. So why don't we start with George?
All right. I guess I'll say that who I am nowadays is I'm a book cover designer. I work for myself, and I've lived in Fairfield about 30 years.
And you're also an accomplished musician. Everyone in town has probably seen you play at one time or another.
Perhaps, yeah. I tend to get out a lot and play. Yeah.
George was the bass player for Bamboo, which still resurrects itself every now and then and does a concert. And Mary?
Yes, well, I guess my history can go back at least 8 years with George. I did move to Fairfield in October of 1982, and I never remembered seeing George. So we met about 8 years ago, and it's funny because I learned to meditate in 1969, and I think it's true for a lot of people that you kind of lose sight of the goal. A lot of people did. And when I met George, that was re-enlivened. So we began our journey together, and where he left off, I picked up, and where I picked up, he left off. It's just been, we've just been, you know.
Seesawing, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been very nice.
Well, I hadn't intended to do it this way because I wanted to go back a little bit to your childhood and all, but I'm tempted to ask, how did meeting George re-enliven your spiritual awakening or your interest in such things?
Well, George was, I would say, a pretty ardent seeker himself. He did a lot of work for the TM organization and continued to look for that goal. He was one of those that never lost sight, I don't believe, and if he did, it was quite brief.
Actually, George, if you don't mind my saying, George belonged to this sort of informal group called the Dome Dogs, who kind of kept each other on the program, and if somebody missed a program, then the whole group, I guess, had to do a certain number of push-ups or something to kind of atone for the laxity of the one member.
Yeah, that's right. We were very committed, and I was a very ardent follower of all that. Oh yeah, ardent follower. So
with very strong arms.
Yeah.
That's where I was at when I met Mary. At that time.